All right, welcome back to episode 2 of the Outfitter Brief, the America Outdoors Association podcast that myself just happened to get on and help. So I'm Erik Weiseth.
And I'm Aaron Lieberman.
And we're still figuring this out as we go, I guess.
So this is episode 2. If you got our first conversation with Forest Service Chief Tom Schultz, I think you'll know generally what we're after: national policy updates, ground level impacts, hopefully bring some of the news directly to you in a way that you can listen to while you drive.
Yeah, and this episode is awesome. So a lot of these are really going to be focused around interviews. And this week's interview was with Jessica Turner from Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. And we had a fascinating conversation covering all sorts of things, because she's in DC and is neck deep in basically every conversation that's happening around outdoor recreation at the federal level. But one that I personally found super interesting, and I hope you will too, is on this concept of framing outdoor recreation in sort of the healthcare space as part of your healthcare regimen, which was super interesting. So we'll get to that later. But to start with, this is our opportunity to basically make Aaron answer questions about what's going on at the national level on stuff related to outdoor outfitters and guides. But I think the first one to start with, and I find it interesting because this is this conversation we've been having for so long around the explosion in prices around liability insurance in this space. And one of these things that I've said for years, I think, is one of the existential crisis or like big things out there that could, upend this industry. And America Outdoors has a new partnership working towards some like significant solutions in this. So Aaron, would you tell us a little bit about what's going on?
I would love to, Erik. Yeah, no, I'm actually really excited about this too. And I probably shouldn't lead into it with such levity. Like Erik said, anybody listening to this is probably at least outfitter adjacent. So like, we don't have to tell you that insurance is brutal, and that those costs and limitations on covers, things like that, have been cascading and not in the right direction increasingly over time. And so we certainly heard that. We do a survey every year of outfitters across the country, and over 90% of all, and we had a very high response rate, and over 90% of all respondents said that their premiums had increased or their coverage had decreased in the past year. And that's building on the back of similar trends over time. And so members have been coming to us in short saying like, hey, this is brutal. Like, we can't sustain these types of costs, and it is existential. And so we really, working with the board, working with our partners, really like buckled down and tried to figure out what we could do to take at least some of the edge off of that. And the good news is that I think we came up with something. So we launched it, I don't know, last month, 2 months ago. Time's a flat circle these days. But we have launched a new endorsed program with CBIZ Adventure Sports. And AO members will have access to up to 10% off of premiums for core lines of coverage. Through this program, you do have to be an AO member in order to take advantage of it. To some degree through affiliates. You can stay with your broker; it's broker neutral. And I think really the takeaway is, the percent off of those premium lines of coverage, those core lines of coverage premiums will vary depending on your overall policy size. But it's a program that we're uniquely able to bring just because organizations like AO and IOGA, I think, have recognition by CBIZ, by those partners, as bringing a unique level of safety culture, ongoing education, risk management practices, and just hold a higher bar among our membership than the general industry. And so as a way to sort of capitalize on that recognition, we have this program. So a lot of people are already taking advantage of it, or getting signed up if you haven't already renewed your policy with CBIZ or otherwise. You can find more information about it on CBIZ's website or directly. I'm not sure if we do. Do we do show notes? Is that a thing? Yeah, we have show notes now. So you can access the link directly to CBIZ's landing page about it in the show notes. But I'm stoked about it. I think it's going to be really helpful for folks.
So for folks who want to learn about it, it's best for them to go direct to CBIZ and not to you.
Yeah. I mean, we do, like, ultimately the value is going to be in the quote. And they're really fast. They have been really fast so far in those turnarounds. We do have a landing page on the new. Almost forgot to mention, AO has a new website just launched last week. So it'll be less brutal when you go there. I think it looks really good. But there is a landing page where you can get to the CBIZ landing page through AO's site. But in the show notes, we'll probably just link out directly to CBIZ, and you can either call them or get a quote directly that way and figure out if it works.
What a time to live in where getting a new website kind of feels like moving into a new house. Like it's a big deal. It's this place you're basically going to live for quite a while.
It's a huge deal. For those listening that have been on AO's previous site, it left a lot to be desired. It was going into a crackhead's house, like it was it was messy. There's stuff you shouldn't see. Like, there wasn't front room, back room division in a way that made a lot of sense. I'm excited about it. I think it looks really good.
I mean, I think the hallmark of a good website is it being almost impossible to find the things that you're looking for, because then you're forced to spend a lot of time there. So it's a good strategy to like hook people in.
Yeah.
So
no search bars. We're not doing search bars.
Awesome. All right. So kind of moving on to the next big thing that we've been talking about for eternity is, I think, the sort of reality that the outdoor industry, and especially some of these backcountry experiences, we've got folks in the wilderness for 3, 4, 18 days, whatever. The 40-hour work week and the sort of standard pay scale model just doesn't really make sense for this industry. And yet, for just sort of, I think, lack of foresight or whatever at certain times, or just some glitches in the legislation, we've been left out of it in a lot of ways under FLSA. But, the Org Act is AO's effort, and really the rest of us too, but with you guys leading the way, to remedy some of those problems. So in a incredibly brief, which I know is challenging for you, way, like a super brief summary of what the Org Act is, and then also just an update on where that legislation is and how people can get involved.
Loud and clear, 10,000 words or less. No, I mean, I think like folks listening to this probably, they certainly know the issue, incompatibility of Fair Labor Standards Act, and in particular, more to the point, like overtime, both reporting requirements and what that means for our type of industry. The Org Act is genuinely, I think, it's a coalition effort. Like AO has certainly been championing the legislation on the national front. But, like Daines is going to be introducing, Senator Daines from Montana is going to be introducing the Senate companion for us. I kind of jumped ahead to the takeaway there, but he's going to be introducing the Senate companion for us. IOGA and our other partners have been instrumental in getting what support we have already. Not least folks in Utah, where there's a ton of ton of support. So the problem that it's trying to solve is just what you already spoke to, that the Fair Labor Standards Act, in particular, the overtime requirements, both reporting and for what that means for costs, is not compatible with our industry, and is not compatible in a way that ends up doing certain things, that ends up either requiring, with full compliance, outfitters to drastically increase prices and make these experiences something that is purely for the ultra wealthy, to cut down on donated trips or discounted trips for folks that otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to go experience these things, which so many outfitters do nationwide, whether it's veteran groups, youth groups, et cetera. Or to get inventive and unfortunately have to try to find ways to work their guides less. So whether it's a day trip and instead of working 7 days a week, you're working, 2 half days spread out by a couple days, or, trying to get people in and out of backcountry trips, which is, difficult, if not impossible in certain circumstances. So all the trade-offs just don't make sense. The Org Act sets out to address that in a very targeted, narrow way. So it doesn't remove any other worker protections, anything else with the FLSA. All it does is focus in on the minimum wage and overtime. And an important thing, just for folks to remember when we talk about minimum wage, is just like a lot of federalism, the higher standard always applies. So like if you're in Colorado and your minimum wage is above the federal standard, that remains the federal wage, or the minimum wage, whether or not the federal minimum wage is exempted for a certain industry. So this is really more of an issue for most folks in the industry around overtime. It's a very targeted amendment for guides that I think are up to speed on the issue or that have been impacted by outfitters trying to comply fully with this, we have a lot of support from guides as well. Um, so where it stands right now, there's been iterations of this bill. There have been iterations of this bill. We have a bill in committee in education and workforce on the House side. Senator Daines, who's been a huge supporter along with other folks in the Montana delegation and the Idaho delegation, are ready to introduce the Senate companion. We're really just trying to find a place to attach it, something that makes sense. It's possible that it goes along through as a standalone, but anything as a standalone these days in this Congress is uniquely difficult. We'll talk about some of the exceptions, I think, in some other updates. But I think key takeaway for folks listening is this is the hard boring of long nails, long boring of hard nails. This stuff takes forever. And this, I feel like we have traction on the org act. I feel like there could be a place to work it in. I do think it's reasonable. I think we've done a good enough job through all of our members of communicating with congressionals that the awareness of what this is and isn't is coming through more clearly. And so I just say, if anybody's listening and is impacted by this or is interested in being more involved in this, we really do just need people, whether it's guide testimonials, outreach directly to members of Congress or members of a committee, all of that stuff helps. And currently we're hoping to get a Senate companion introduced maybe as soon as this week.
So would it be helpful, for guides who have been impacted by businesses, they're really trying to kind of walk the line on this? When we tried to do it in our business, we saw guides actually working less because of this. And so it was actually having a negative impact on them. So if there's guides out there who have had that experience or just the complexity of it becomes a nightmare, if they were to write a testimonial and email it to you over at America Outdoors, that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, yep, absolutely. And both to AO, if that's easier, but also just, let's say you're a guide in Colorado. I've talked to a number of guys in Colorado who experienced what you described. Emailing, sending something over to staffers in your congressional offices and copying America Outdoors and saying hey, here's just my perspective. That stuff, I think to their credit, most members of Congress are concerned that they should be, right? Anytime you see anything that touches the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, you should ask yourself as a congressional, is this ethical? So their knee-jerk reaction is, I think, correct. I think getting that perspective from guides is extremely valuable. So yes.
Well, yeah, you and I sat in a meeting, with a Democrat who would have influence on this, right? And he's like, yeah, I conceptually understand what you're saying, but this idea of getting rid of overtime for employees as a Democrat is a position that is, I'm going to have
It's the
to
third rail.
really understand it and going to have to believe from evidence from kind of the people who would be impacted by that. But this is actually a good idea because it comes off as industry trying to screw the little guy. But in this case, it's just not what it is. It's actually industry trying to save industry and the little guy, I think has been my experience with this. So
no, that's exactly right. I mean, we just need to flesh out. The good news is that we have the benefit of being in an honest position. It is true that guides whose outfitters have tried to walk this line have been in that unfortunate position of getting less work or having it not comport with the way they want to work. And just hearing that from people, from the workers themselves is what those key offices need to hear. So if you're listening, guides, please do reach out.
Yep. Awesome. So let's move on to an even more fun one. Our good friend and lover of public lands, Senator Mike Lee of Utah, has just made some waves around the roadless rule. So if you want to give people kind of an update on where that stands, that'd be great. And for those who are listening and can't understand sarcasm, there may have been hints of it hiding in there.
How else are they supposed to pick up on sarcasm? Is your eyebrows? For those of you listening who can't see the sarcasm face I have.
I don't know, man.
Yeah. No, so, okay. There's a couple things going on with the roadless rule, and it's all really, the good news is it's all really confusing. Sarcasm face, you can tell by the eyebrows. So there's a couple different tracks. To start, people will probably recall, a while ago, I don't know, fall, the Forest Service announced announced its intent to repeal the roadless rule administratively. So that would be through rulemaking, right? We're still waiting on sort of the next step there from the Forest Service itself for that draft repeal language. So that'd be done administratively. That process allows for public comment. The last time that we saw public comments on the roadless rule, it's always a difficult way to measure things, but I think it was 95%, objectively speaking, just like by count, 95% supported the establishment of the roadless rule. And I know that like Senator Heinrich and others have been referencing more updated polls around like 98%, like 98% of folks support either the maintenance or the maintenance of the roadless rule. But so there's the administrative track where the Forest Service or USDA has directed the Forest Service to look at or to pursue an administrative repeal. Notably for folks in the Idaho audience or Colorado audience listening, there are states that are exempt from that because they went through the process of developing their own roadless rules on the state level. But otherwise, that would apply categorically nationwide. More recently, there's both a House bill to repeal or to nullify by law the roadless rule that has been introduced by Wyoming Representative Hageman. I have not seen that one moving. I'm not sure whether or not it will, but it had the reception you might expect when introduced. And in fairness, like there are legitimate grievances with the roadless rule, and there are legitimate problems with the roadless rule in certain areas. But we're talking about a nationwide policy and something that otherwise, like that certain states approached individually for a reason. To get to the more recent updates, so it's worth framing out like there's three different things happening. One, the legislation introduced. Before that, the administrative approach to repealing the roadless rule. And then most recently, what Eric was speaking to is there's a bill, Senate Bill 140, the Wildfire Prevention Act, which is one of those like unicorns these days of being a bipartisan bill, like genuinely bipartisan bill. In the 11th hour before that bill hearing, the night before, it was reported, I think E&E reported that Senator Lee was introducing an amendment to the bill, which he did, and which did pass in the Senate committee. That amendment takes this otherwise like very bipartisan, milquetoasty, like does good stuff, but not too exciting Wildfire Prevention Act and adds to it a provision that would in and of itself nullify the roadless rule. And like there's all sorts of buzz phrases that people use, but people would call it like a poison pill, right? Because you take this otherwise bipartisan bill, which is super rare these days, and you introduce something that either kills the bill itself because people have to oppose it and thereby oppose like all the other good things it does, or support it and let this poison pill go through.
Well, and what was a bipartisan bill in committee and was going to come out of committee bipartisan ended up coming out of committee on a purely partisan vote because of that.
Yep. And so it's past Senate Energy and Natural Resources, and it's now moving on to the full Senate floor for a vote. I think if folks are really wonky and interested, the committee hearing, which are all posted on YouTube, was really interesting. And there were some great comments at the end of the hearing after the actual vote. It's actually after the end of the business meeting, but after the vote itself, where members sort of speak, they're no longer in sort of formal dialogue. They're speaking to the issue itself. And Senator Risch had some really great remarks about, we're caught in this back and forth, but like really what Idaho did and what I'd encourage everybody else to do is look at what can we do on a state level to address these things that's like more granular, that isn't such a broad brush. And yeah, so I mean, we're tracking it. I think the takeaway for folks that are looking at the roadless rule is it seems at this point difficult. It is obviously like on the chopping block, right? In multiple different ways. The most surefire way for it to be for it to be chopped is for legislation to pass that nullifies it legislatively, and that prevents other rulemaking to reestablish it, because that's happened back and forth over time. The administrative approach was one that I think presented, for those concerned about the rescission of the roadless rule, that presented less, still concern, but less concern overall, because administratively you can just draft another rule that restores the roadless rule, and it had a ton of support, so your odds are pretty good. Um, so I'd say it's worth folks. If you are concerned about this, if you need to learn more about this, one, you should be reading our newsletters, because there's stuff about it in there. Two, reach out. I mean, if you're an outfitter that stands to be impacted by this, if you operate near or adjacent to or in or adjacent to a roadless area, this would impact your operation. Like, reach out to us. And also definitely reach out to your senators, because that's where the next step will take on something that could like codify the nullification of the roadless rule.
Yeah. All right, let's, for the sake of time here, keep moving. There's two more things I kind of wanted to hit before we get to the interview. And one, again, just kind of briefly, is there's a couple executive orders that came out, or an executive order that came out that rescinded a couple previous executive orders related to travel management plans and motorized access and some of that kind of stuff. And I have found them to be confusing, and I'm somewhat, after doing a lot of research on them, still kind of unclear what they actually do. So, seeing as how you go deeper than I do, give us all an update on what happened there.
Yeah. So the short version is, and the longer version is just the same as the short, but it gets way more complicated. So the short version is, as Eric said, there's President Trump signed an executive order rescinding executive orders 11644 and 11989. The rescission of those executive orders does not, in and of itself, reopen any route to motorized use, alter any BLM or associated resource management plans themselves, change a forest motor vehicle use plan in and of itself. So the rescission of those orders do not, in and of themselves, as has been reported out there, do not in and of themselves directly or substantively undermine or like roll back the travel management rule, which is really the concern. That these things are going to touch the travel management, and that there will, in really broad terms, there won't be the restrictions or delineations between where motorized use is allowed, appropriate, and to what degree it is, based on sort of local input and development over time. So I think the key takeaway for folks is, like, it is really, and we talk about this a little bit with Jess in the interview, but it's really easy. And frankly, it's hard to not just be in a constant state of alarm these days, especially in this industry, or for folks that are really passionate about the outdoors and public lands. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be vigilant, but on this one, for what it's worth, it is worth maintaining vigilance around travel management to try to understand how any of these things could impact your operation or resources that you really care about. But to know that the rescission of these EOs in and of themselves do not change anything automatically on the ground, that they could allow for those things to be changed with fewer impediments and more quickly through other established means, like through, a forest plan amendment or other plan amendments. And so I'd say, like, now, if there's something you can do, which you can, it's like, where do I operate, or what areas do I care about? And figuring out what currently is the status of motorized like use restrictions planning around these areas. Do I want more? Do I want less? How would this impact like the values or the scenic values? And then to start documenting those and asking, and if you are permitted, to reach out to your permit administrator, rec planner, whoever, and ask if they have any insight to whether or not, what is governing the areas that you particularly are concerned about. So arm yourself with information.
Yeah, and any changes that come, like, this opens the door for changes, but those changes would still require activities that will have public process, right? Like, so there will be
Yes,
opportunities. It's really opening the door to do a thing, but that there's still, you have to do the thing, and
correct.
there will be opportunities for public engagement throughout that.
Yeah. think of like motorized restrictions as the core of an onion. Like this is peeling back a layer. You're not cutting to the core. It's just saying like, all right, we have one less layer that is not the most substantive part of the onion. I'm not crying yet to belabor this metaphor, but like it is one less sort of impediment to either the removal or to the adjustment of management of motorized use on federal lands.
Awesome. All right. So, kind of last thing before we move on to the interview, let's end on what feels like maybe a win. Arizona just had big change related to liability laws and stuff like that. So, give us an update on what's going on down in Arizona.
Yeah. So it's a short update. I said that last time too. None of these are going to be short. We'll have to work on that. But so the Grand Canyon River Outfitters Association, and with support from America Outdoors and a number of other folks in the local level, introduced or were able to get some legislation sponsored this session on the state level in Arizona to address some shortcomings in state laws governing the enforceability of liability waivers for outfitters. So similar to what IOGA did in Idaho. To say, short version, it should be clear in the law that these things that people knowingly sign, where these liability waivers should be allowable and enforceable by law, is the takeaway. That wasn't the case, and Arizona was a particularly complicated case law history, I think, that led up to it, and I'm hoping to dive deeper in that on a future pod. But the takeaway is that it made it through the House. It passed unanimously from the Senate floor, which is incredible. I think there's a lot of bipartisanism similar to the national level. Like Arizona's a microcosm as well right now. There's a lot of partisan divide there, but passed unanimously through the Senate and was signed by Governor Hobbs, I believe, right? By Governor Hobbs in Arizona. They did go out of session, so the legislature went sine die, so I don't think it'll go into effect until this fall. But summary, it's wildly important and deeply unsexy, right? Like it is a huge accomplishment, and getting it through in a single session, I think, is a testament to G. Croa and to all the folks that were involved. But also hopefully is indicative of what some other states should start looking at and trying to address, because it's part and parcel of why we're dealing with bigger insurance premiums.
Yeah, you're right. It's something that's similar to what we did in Idaho. I think Oregon's also had a bit of a win on this recently. And if you're in a state that hasn't really looked at this, it does seem like this is a thing we should get broader movements in the industry towards. Just like common sense clarification in statute around inherent risk and the viability of waivers, like those two things. So awesome. Well, we want to keep this thing moving so that you can download this on an audio or in a podcast format and not an audiobook format. So I think we'll move on to the interview with Jessica. So like I said before, I thought this was a really interesting conversation with a wildly sharp person that
Yeah.
was super fun, talking about how outdoor recreation is like one of the very few things that's actually bipartisan right now and getting through Congress in a bipartisan fashion in a time when nothing is getting through. We talked about healthcare and that, the connection to outdoor rec and maybe some more direct lines connecting those two things in the future. I loved it. Anything, Aaron, you want to prep people for as we get into it?
Just that, I think we asked Jess to give her take on some pretty important bills that are moving right now, sort of companions, the America the Beautiful Act, the Senate version, and Great America Outdoors Act 250, both of which they have different contents right now that ought to be worked out, but both of which, at least in the top level, do some really important things. So reauthorizing Legacy Restoration Fund funding, which, like, whether or not you are aware, but if you operate on the ground, does a lot of things that you care about, and is a really important tool for at least starting to take the edge off of deferred maintenance. So getting her take on that. She was, Jess is in most of the important rooms. She was also physically in the hearing on the Senate side when that went through. So I think that's a great part of the conversation, something that absolutely is relevant to outfitters and guides.
Yeah, if you like boat ramps or trails
Yeah,
or
boat ramps,
roads
trails.
or
Yeah.
literally anything. I mean, as we're talking about
Yeah.
trails not being cleared, like that's a huge, like we want more funding for clearing trails. Like that is a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think, there's I had a conversation just the other day, and somebody was asking me whether or not there's a direct overlap with the Trail Stewardship Act, and I think the short answer is no, that there's no direct nexus. Like, neither of these bills say, like, you will use these funds toward these things, but I think there's a huge opportunity, and I think really that's where this person was going, which is, like, to the extent that there is funding appropriated for deferred maintenance, and to the degree that trails do fit within those guardrails, which they do within these bills, that it does open up, if not for outfitter fee offset and things like that, which are a bit different. It does open up additional funding for things like trail clearing, trail maintenance, but also, a huge amount for just actually getting to the trails themselves. So culverts, roads, all that sort of stuff. It's a big deal. There are some elements, in particular in the Senate version, that are, I think, a bit concerning, that I believe Jess speaks to a little bit. So I'll just leave it there for now. But yeah, I love this interview. Jess is an awesome partner for Outfitters Guides, for our organizations. Hope everybody enjoys.
Awesome. Well, here's the interview with Jessica Turner from Outdoor Recreation Roundtable.
So for the interview today, we have Jessica Turner, who is the president of Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, National Coalition of Outdoor Recreation Associations and Businesses. Jess has more than a decade of experience shaping federal recreation policy in Washington, D.C., including directing the Outdoor Industry Association's recreation portfolio, helping secure official recognition of outdoor recreation's contributions to the U.S. GDP, and earlier work at the U.S. Department of the Interior on initiatives like First Lady Michelle Obama's Let's Move Outside. Jessica has been an instrumental partner in bringing the outdoor industry together behind major bipartisan wins like the Great America Outdoors Act, and critically for our audience, the Explore Act, which, as everybody knows, I think, modernizes recreation access, streamlines permitting, and invests in the public lands and rural communities that outfitters depend on. So with all of that, Jess, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about ORR, what the organization does, and something of your background.
Sure. Thank you. Excited to do this. The Guides and Outfitters have been such a critical part of my work ever since I was at Outdoor Industry Association, and some of your issues came to the forefront. I said, I really want to work on this. And that was way, way back when we kind of started the real drive towards Explore Act. So good policy takes a long time, and it takes really good partners. And America Outdoors has been one of those really good partners for a long time. So excited to still work with the organization at ORR. We are the leading coalition of all of the trade associations across the entire outdoor recreation economy. So there's about 110,000 American businesses in our $1.3 trillion recreation economy. And what ORR has come to do over the past 7 years that we've been around is bring all of those voices together, especially through their national trade associations like America Outdoors, and come with one voice to federal policy, to state policy, to educate cultural leaders, to really move the needle and make outdoor recreation a key issue in the American dialogue. And we focus on three main things: funding, access, and infrastructure. And it's amazing to see that that's place of agreement, whether you're an RV company, a boat manufacturer, a hunter, an angler, a river runner. You probably want more funding for public lands and waters, better access, and updated infrastructure to do all these things. And of course, the business certainty to ensure that your businesses can continue to provide these amazing experiences. And that fits in with things like trade, and some of the other things we work on. So it's been a pleasure. And we're just getting started. I feel like every day there's a whole new frontier. No day is the same in this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Eric and I both probably want to circle back to, because this is something we deal with a lot, right? But how do you manage big tents, and also find those cross-cutting priorities around which all of us can align and elevate the things that are most important to all of our respective groups, organizations, stakeholders, things like that. But before that, similarly top level, given your, you know, presence in DC, both historically and currently, your connections, both with members of Congress and with agencies, I would love to get your take on how you see this current administration, or even if you wanted to zoom out, this current era in relation to outdoor recreation more broadly.
Yeah, I think it's an era of immense opportunity, and one where you cannot shy away from government affairs. I've never seen government affairs be more important. in any other era. And I say that for a couple reasons. I've been working in government affairs for a long time for this industry. And when I started, a lot of it was offensive. Like, what can we do here? How can we get better, trade deals? We had some good trade deals. How can we get better trade deals? How can we get more offices of outdoor recreation? How can we get more wilderness or more conserved areas or whatever those things were on the OIA? I feel like now it's a lot of defending where we are, not necessarily just because of administration, just a lot of things. There's so much happening with the economy. There's so much happening with people and what they're spending their time on. So we're in the defense mode of our participation, of our funding, of our trade agreements, of our public lands to some extent. And you have to pay attention because there's these big things happening. And Aaron, when you were first starting, we were working on defending our public lands. From sell-off. That wasn't a partisan issue. These are like, largely bipartisan, the issues that we work on.
Hmm.
And at the same time, there's these smaller things happening that could be wonderful opportunities if you seize them. And if you're not paying attention, they could cause, damage to a certain sector of the recreation economy or the whole recreation economy for generations. And that could be around trade. It could be about public land management. It could be around planning rules. It could be around a decision totally outside of ENR. We're working on a transportation, very like weirdly ad hoc thing that could actually incredibly help recreation, that we have to pay attention to the transportation surface, act because of it. So I feel like it is so much happening
Hmm.
that, it's almost like you have to decide, that you're going to play, and then you have to play and you have to play at all levels and play really hard. And I think we've shown tremendous wins in areas that I've been working on for 20 years that I've never gotten before, and they've happened the past couple months. And I think we've also had, the resurfacing of things that we thought we put to bed a long time ago, like public land sell-off and, and funding for public lands. Like I thought we were past those things.
Hmm.
So, opportunity, immense opportunity, and also a lot of change happening all at once from all areas. And I think being in DC or having a pulse on DC or showing up in DC when you can come, it's probably the most important thing you can do as a business. It's not the time to look away and say, I'm sure we're going to be okay. And hopefully, I think your members are very engaged, so I think they know that.
Yeah, I think I'd like to follow up on that just a little bit. You talked a little bit about this is sort of an era where there's probably more defense than maybe, offense. And I know from people I talk to, that is sort of the constant feeling, right? Of every single thing that comes out is looked at immediately through a lens of skepticism,
Right.
just because there's been a lot of, like the growth in public land sales and growth in
Hmm.
defunding. I think the Forest Service restructure is a great example of this.
Hmm. Yeah.
In like, okay, we have a lot of people who like, oh, this administration is changing is restructuring the Forest Service. The goal obviously is to kill it, and it's bad,
Yep.
without really getting into the details of it. But it's that instant lens of skepticism.
Yep.
And so I think, as someone who's in DC, certainly far more than I am, and I think probably more than Aaron is, and like more connected and everything else, it would be awesome to hear what your message would be kind of directly to our, for me personally, like Idaho people, but our outfitters
Yeah.
and our guides who aren't going to necessarily be in DC doing that advocacy work, but how should they think about the things that they hear, and should they be looking at everything through a lens of skepticism, or I don't know. I don't really know how to frame the rest of that, but
No, I
I think you
totally
get the
get
idea.
what you're coming at, and I think there's reason for skepticism. Like I think that's all right, and it could be my vantage point, which is 30,000-foot level. So like I have a different angle and different charge. Like I have to work with everyone all the time.
Hmm.
So it's a little different. I don't have the liberty of just saying this sucks, like I hate you. That's not, we would never do that. I think with
We'll
the
get we'll,
with
we'll get the list of who that applies to
Oh,
afterward.
yeah, I'm
So
sure there's a
sorry, just keep
list
going.
when
Yeah.
I have time to think about it. But I'll say 2 things. Um, I think the folks, at least in the administration, that oversee our public lands, and USDA and the very high up in public lands and USDA and Forest Service and, DOI care about recreation, full stop. Like, I really see that. I think they're recreationists, and I think they care about recreation. So just acknowledging that people in really high seats probably care about recreation more than I've ever seen in an administration, that doesn't mean all the decisions are always going to be the best ones for recreation business, because I think they care about timber and oil. I think they care about a lot of things. But like, have I ever seen, secretaries and deputy secretaries at this level owning pretty much every product that we represent? No, I don't. I haven't. That's really heartening. So I think, one, people understand recreation and they care about it. And I think, two, with the Forest Service reorganization, what I find is we are against so many other priorities for them, but we're not necessarily the chopping block they're trying to get at. So, like,
Hmm.
no one's thinking, how do we wake up and screw recreation today? No one. Like, I don't think in Congress either. I think a lot of people are like, recreation's awesome. Let's help them when we can. I think they're waking up and saying, okay, we've got an energy agenda, we've got a timber agenda, we've got economic agenda, we've got a rural agenda. And our job is to fit ourselves into all of those agendas. And I think that's the opportunity piece, which is where the reorganization, it's going to happen. Shouting as loud as you can about it not being a good idea, it was already underway and we knew it was underway. So
Yeah.
like, if you have that space and energy, like, there's definitely a place for those things. But I think for your organizations and your businesses who have to work within these new constraints and have to work with people in these agencies, we saw it, and Aaron and I talked about this with a small group of ORR members. What's the opportunity here? If they are saying, and Governor Cox said this, the USDA leadership, they are saying recreation is a reason why we're organizing. It's important. And we're actually moving to a recreation state, a state that's put more dollars into recreation than another state. Okay, let's hold them to that. Then what are you going to do about it? We've been working on a secretarial memo. We're working on ways to codify agency positions to ensure guides and outfitters aren't screwed in this process, so we don't lose institutional knowledge. And, I do think at some point we're going to see something that we're going to kind of like about staffing and recreation. And we've been working on that really hard. So you take something that isn't going to change, like the reorg, and you go work with the partners to make them understand how it could impact your businesses, and then how, the opportunity is, how could they, direct it better? Where could they make, different choices down the process to have that limited negative impact, perhaps even a positive impact on the businesses. Now, something like travel management, which is, another subset of things they're talking about, that's very malleable still. So that is one of those places where maybe if you really don't like travel management repeal, go shout from the rooftops. Like, so I think it's a lot of determining where can you move the needle and have an impact, and where is it probably a waste of breath, but there's an opportunity. You just got to find the good. And
Yep.
in public land sell-off, there was an impact to be had. Raise your voice. That is the time. In roadless rule, right now it feels like maybe in the nuance there is, but like, they've been going at this for a long time. There might be an opportunity to talk about how roadless rule impacts businesses, so there's a better alternative created, but they're going to do something with the roadless rule. So I think it's a lot about time and energy, and the nuance is just about, where the trajectory can be changed with your time and energy, and where you should just steer it into like the least possible bad or a possible good. And I think we've been able to do that so far on a lot of things.
I think ORR and the broader community has done an excellent job of doing that. And I think it reminds me of an aphorism. The pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, and the realist adjusts the sails. And I think that
Yeah.
our organizations, and certainly from what I've seen of ORR, that our organizations are kind of always necessarily in that place, at least if we're doing our jobs right. We're
Yep.
necessarily always in that place of, here are the things I can change, here are the things I can't change. Like, what practically, pragmatically, realistically are the things that I can do or
Yep.
influence, and to what degree. But speaking of those, as a stilted segue, the things we can influence are the things that we do like the outcomes of. Uh, I think this is almost hot off the press. Doesn't quite qualify as genuinely hot off the press, but Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee advanced the America the Beautiful Act
Yep.
end of last week, as the bill reauthorizing the Legacy Restoration Fund. I'm not telling Jess this, telling any listeners this. And
What does
ORR
it
has
do?
been, yeah, never heard of it.
No.
And ORR has been, as with so many of these big pieces of big cross-cutting legislation, has been really key in advancing this and driving this forward for a while now. So I think you were actually in that Senate committee hearing
Mhm.
physically, right?
Yep. Yep.
Which is a great vantage point. Would you mind
Yeah.
walking us through, for everybody listening in, what this bill is, what just happened, and how it pairs with the new
Yeah.
GAOA 250 House version?
I'm gonna say historic a couple times during this, I think, but I'm like, I don't wanna downplay that. I mean this
Hmm.
truly. We are in a very partisan era. We're in an era of a lot of discourse, and we're in an era in that committee in particular, where we have Senator Lee, who tried to sell off our federal lands, and Senator Heinrich, who is the most staunch supporter of our federal lands in the entire government. Full stop. Those two people run the energy committee and nothing is moving, as you can imagine. Nothing is passing and nothing is getting to a markup. And if it is, it's very partisan. We saw in an hour and a half after the bill text was agreed upon, so the staff stayed up all night, the members stayed up all night, DOI was up all night negotiating text to get to the point where they could mark up this bill, and there was a markup without a single nay on that committee, and I don't even know, I think Explore Act was the last time we had a full. It's kind of nice when our stuff is the good stuff for them, but not only was it all agreed on, when I talked to some staff after, they were like, "We understand each other." Like, for the first time, we get like, we're talking about categorical exclusions, not in, Dems hate them and Republicans want them. We're talking about them in like, how do projects actually move through construction better and
Hmm.
easier, and how do you spend your money better through guardrailed cat axes? Like, that's a very different conversation than even around permitting when they're talking these things, or around energy. And so Murkowski had a great quote that we put up, because it wasn't just that committee, the appropriations committee is involved, the finance committee. This is $10 billion bill. This is huge. So the Explore Act was amazing because it was bipartisan and unanimous consent. We weren't spending any money. It was still huge. It was a lot of policy and a lot to, negotiate. This is $10 billion of money, the government has to come up with towards our parks in an era where the government's trying to spend less. So it's a really big deal. And we posted about, Senator Murkowski was just like, this is how the Senate should function. This is how this experience was one where everyone came to the table wanting to get to yes. They were at very different points on how they got there, but
Hmm.
no one was at the table to say no, to get a political chit in, to make a statement that would, go viral. There was none of that. They all said the end of this has to be Wednesday morning at 9:30 a.m. We have a bill to pass through our committee, and they worked, through the night towards that, and they got there. So in the spirit of that, I am just floored that we can do that, especially after, if you follow, like, some of these senators have gone at it on Twitter, and like, it's gotten really ugly with Epstein things. And I mean, it's just been kind of a bad era for politics in general. And this committee is no different. And so I love that we got to a good place. I felt like the staff felt good, the senators felt good, and now we're moving to the House. So hot off the press, the House Wednesday morning, we'll have a markup of this bill, and it could go to the Senate floor this week. It could pass the Senate, and we could have a bill signed by the president by July 4th, which is, historic. I mean, it's really amazing. So $10 billion is not something to take lightly. And for our public lands and waters, especially BLM and Forest Service, I think what's really important, fish, our industry fought for those dollars. It used to be the parks bill. So 6 years ago, this was just funding for parks, and our industry came in and said, parks are awesome, but most people are not going to parks, especially for recreation, and our other lands and waters need it. And it was really fun to be at OR. That was the first bill we worked on when I came in, and we brought the agencies on board, and now we have this bill that supports all of our federal lands and waters. And to get $10 billion right now is just amazing. So stay tuned Wednesday morning for that markup. I will be there, and hopefully I'll be at the signing in a couple weeks.
Quick interjection before probably another follow-up question on that, or on LRF reauthorization. But I just think the way you just framed it, certainly resonates with me, where it is worth noting that recreation writ large is in a place where, while Congress cannot come together around literally anything, and where they are at each other's throats on a daily basis, recreation remains, or it maybe not remains, but has become this
Yep.
holdout where we can still agree about the things we agree about,
Yep.
and agree that we're not going to agree about the other things, at least generally speaking. But more to your point, that we also are educating not just members of Congress, but congressional staff and the powers that be about the things they need to understand to actually legislate effectively for recreation and for public lands. So like when you
Yep.
talk about Cat X's, that fits in the category I call like deeply unsexy, but wildly important,
Yeah.
right? Like we need those staffers to understand what functions those play so that
Right.
it isn't this partisan binary.
And
Uh,
there's been this conversation that they can never get to because it was like no on one side and absolutely we have to on the other side. And like they never really talked about what are we trying to achieve with them. They're trying to
mhm.
achieve the same things. They both want better projects, less money, speedier times, more community involvement. Like that's awesome. And now I think they finally have a framework and that might expand to their energy agenda. That might expand to other portfolios. So it's really exciting because they're not just working, these senators aren't just working on our stuff. They're working on a lot of really important stuff for Americans. And we're like the reason they can come together, just like an Explore Act. I think the 4 or 5 minutes right after the bill passed when the senators could give comments is like a very good just if you're feeling down, civic service, like just because they started fighting over jokingly how they would prioritize. And Senator King from Maine said, well, we have to do it alphabetically because his park is Acadia. And then, Danes was like, absolutely not. We have to do it backwards alphabetically because his is Yellowstone. I mean, it was just so like really genuinely, they were laughing and joking and enjoying each other. And it was heartening to know that our work brings them together. And if you think about your members' work on a daily basis, what that does for like Americans, who have different opinions and they're on a raft trip together. I mean, I've learned so much on raft trips, like crazy things, but also really important things. But about people, because you're on a boat sometimes for a couple days, with people you don't know. And I just love that. I just love that our industry can bring, Americans together, like on the ground level, like what you're doing, and also, some of our leaders together around these issues.
So I love all of that. I think we probably have some folks who hear everything that you're saying, but still don't quite understand what this actually is.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
so
Maybe
maybe
I
just
skip that.
ground a little bit of what this bill is actually going to do and what it's
Sure.
reauthorizing and the kinds of projects that people can expect or changes that come out of it.
So we are not appropriating enough money for federal agencies annually for what they
Yes.
need to function and operate, and that's been decades. This is decades. 20 years ago, outdoor recreation conservation budget was 2% of the federal non-discretionary. Now it's less than 1%. So as people are getting outside more, as things are more expensive, as climate has taken a toll in some places, we are actually declining as a percentage of the budget. So it's a huge issue and it's a massive one we need to solve. For now, we're basically in a boat. There's a hole at the bottom, and this is our lifeline out of that with a bucket of $10 billion for deferred maintenance. So these are projects that are sometimes not the most visible. It could be a water waste treatment system in a park. It could be a visitor center. It could be a historic building. It could be a trail system. It could be a boat put in. I mean, Aaron, we've worked with America Outdoors, and like there's just some areas where the water level isn't what it used to be, and same with the marine industry and the
Mhm.
fishing industry, and the docks and the boat put-ins aren't getting to the water. Like you think about places like Lake Powell and Lake Michigan. There's just really good examples of that. Those projects don't have funding because that happens that year. So they go on this thing called the deferred maintenance. And if you own a house, as you defer maintenance, it gets more and more expensive. So what Congress agreed to in 2020 when this bill passed was actually we need to start putting a down payment on all of those projects, or this is just going to blow up and our system's going to fail us. So what we're really excited about is these are important projects to just the experience on our public lands. And they're important projects like literally to campgrounds, marinas, trails, boat launches all over the country. Some amazing examples from the last round. A lot of these places have like been inaccessible because of this deferred maintenance. So we're really focused on the access projects that are going to expand opportunities for recreationists. And I think instead of there being this blank check to just say, let's fund our agencies more, Congress feels better about the fact that it's just a terrible fiscal policy to leave billions of dollars on the deferred maintenance and they keep growing. The idea, hopefully, someday is we fund our land management agencies enough on an annual
Right.
basis
Yeah.
that we don't have this, but we don't fund
Yeah.
anything at that level. So actually,
Well, the
I
hope
think
is
it's
maybe we do both and in future, right? We say like, yeah, we can
totally
offset the compounding interest, so to speak, the compounding impact of not properly or sufficiently funding for ongoing, let alone for deferred maintenance activities, these agencies that manage lands and
right.
public trusts. But maybe we, increase their funding at least commensurate with historical levels and also address the backlog. but
Yeah,
baby
exactly. And I
steps.
think
And this is a
what's
big baby
unique
step.
about this is a big baby. Yeah, this is a I baby step. I'm like, doesn't
Yeah,
feel that
that's
way.
probably not the right word. We'll cut that out
Um,
after.
no,
It's a
that's funny.
toddler step.
My, my, you know, the thing about these projects too, and the way these bills are shaped, is it really goes to local contractors. Like there's a lot of opportunity for public-private partnership. So I think of it as a little bit different of how a normal recreation project would happen. It's a little bit more of like maybe one of your outfitters really cares about a particular boat launch and wants to come in and work with the agency on it, or maybe the state does, or maybe the concessionaire in a park does. There's a lot more wiggle room opportunities. And what we saw the last time around was a lot of money driving to local communities because Acadia
Mhm.
had this huge project, or the campground in Yosemite. Like they go out, they bid the contract. It's not just park workers. Actually, it's usually not, because they don't have the infrastructure to create those huge projects overnight. It's youth corps and it's local businesses. And so like Acadia, if you look at our recreation economy report, I just love looking at Maine had this big bump in recreation construction over the past 5 years. And a lot of that is because of the recreation construction that was going on around Acadia through LRF. So it's a local boom, not just in our world, which we love, but it's a local boom to like that community and their local businesses. So there's like no downside, I think, of spending money in this way. And we're just hoping that recreation gets more projects this time around, because we did like George Washington Memorial Parkway. We did the tidal basin, this massive, expensive projects, like in the hundreds of millions. And a lot of ours kind of fell to the bottom just because they were less expensive and not as urgent. So now I think recreation is going to see a lot more visibility this round.
And there is even a dedicated structure within, at least I believe, well, I think in
The House
both
version.
versions. So yeah, just the house versions
Yeah.
for sportsman specific projects.
And recreation projects. Yeah,
And
I
and
think,
I mean, it frames it as sportsman, but realistically, it
yes.
goes through all the gambit of the things that you just outlined. So whether that's trails or boat ramps, whatever else, but for the
Yeah.
nexus of sort of outdoor recreation, right?
We got a 15% carve out in the House bill, which is amazing, because 15% of 10 billion is not a baby step, for recreation and sportsman projects. I don't know that that will stay for a lot of reasons because of the speed of this bill. I think we 100% could have gotten there, but the bill is moving to get done by July 4th, and we're not going to hold it up. And that piece needs more community thought around it. So I think we're going to try to find another way that we can get similar funding dedicated to recreation without that particular carve out.
So that's a good segue to, I think, my next question, both in terms of the things that, it'd be great to be included, but we may not have time for, and some things that I think will be of concern, both to, groups within ORR and certainly within AO, such as the codification of the foreign visitor fee.
Yeah.
But I guess really without, and feel free to speak to that, but without
Yeah.
getting whether the positive provisions, the things we wish would be in there or otherwise, what's the realistic path forward and like timeline
So
from your
I
view?
talked to some of the members this morning, and they're negotiating now between the House and the Senate version for the House vote on Wednesday. The international pass came up as one point of concern in the Senate hearing, and I think it will continue to come up. It's not
Mhm.
working great, and we're going to expand it in this bill to help pay for it. So maybe before we expand it, we should make it sure it works great, or businesses understand how it works. So we have a really strong ask to either do report language, an oversight hearing, or bill text that directs the agencies to be much more prescriptive, inclusive of our businesses, and have a timeline that's more realistic. So you could be you would be waived if you've already bought a pass and say this goes into effect July 1st. You would not be expected as a business or as a foreign visitor, to pay that new fee. So how do we grandfather
Mhm.
people in who are already kind of in the process? Those are really important things in the grand scheme of the huge bill and what we're accomplishing. Like, it's hard to wiggle this in and say, make sure you're addressing it. But it'll be addressed in the bill, in the report language, or separately with Interior and with an oversight hearing. I think it's a big concern of ORR members. We're going to talk about it a little bit tomorrow with some ORR members. And I
Mhm.
think that we all agree we need revenue generators, and we all agree that other countries are doing something similar and we could be doing it. I think it's just the context of which it was rolled out. And we need more time to understand the processes, and we need to definitely be looped in more on the front end. And I think people agree up and down about that. So I think keep raising your voice on that issue. What we're trying to do is not prevent the bill from moving forward because of that, because we got to figure it out and we got to get this money. This money is,
Right. It goes back to the top. Like, hey, here's an
yeah,
enormously positive thing. How many utils
yes,
do you get from this enormously positive thing? How many utils do you lose as a result of foreign
totally.
visitor fee or the application of it? Like, are there trade-offs? Absolutely, 100%. And they're real.
Yeah.
But like, what can we do in the immediate term? And in particular, when it seems like it's moving fast, like if you had, in your crystal ball, you don't have to venture a guess, but if you had to venture a guess, what do you think the timeline is on
Oh,
this moving?
I think there's an expectation that it'll pass the Senate this week. It'll pass the House. I think they're out next week, maybe following don't quote me on they're out next week. It'll pass the House as soon as it can after Wednesday's hearing, and I think the president will sign
Mhm.
on in before July 4th, which is
That's the
that's
goal, yeah.
never I've never been a part of anything like this, and it's kind of like reconciliation. Like it's moving and it's so big, it's like it's almost too big to fail, but still advocate for it. And I think the international fee is something we're taking it really seriously, and because we have the attention, I think, of all these members wanting to move this fast, I think it's almost like the urgency is creating a good opportunity to get something clearer across. It might not be everything we need, but it'll be a good first step. And if it's eminent that this is happening, I think we also have another reason to go back to the agencies and say, What you're doing in 10 parks is going to happen in parks all and in public lands all across the country. We've got to have a better way."
Yep.
It's great to see something moving forward this fast with this much energy that is supporting public lands,
Yeah.
like supporting our resources and everything else. That's, again, sort of going back to that first question, in a time where people view everything with skepticism, this is a bit of a bright light. So that's great. Thank you for the work. I think we'll pivot a little bit to something I find super interesting. You wrote an op-ed recently in USA Today about something that I've been thinking about for a long time, but you structured it in a way that really grounds it. And I found fascinating around healthcare and the outdoors, pushing an initiative that ORR has been building around America's outdoor era.
Mhm.
So the concept is spot on. I think there's lots of data out there showing that time outdoors is good for us physically, mentally, and also that we're doing a lot less of that. So it's it feels like you're framing this concept. Now it's like, okay, what does that structure actually look like? What is sort of the action that's going to happen? What do you explain this whole concept for people and
Yep.
where you actually think it's going and what the goals really are?
So you can cut any of this out if it's too long. I'll try to be really brief. But we had a CEO forum 2 years ago with CEOs from all different trade associations. So ski, bike, hike. Some of your CEOs were there, MGA, um, camp, fish, hunt, everything. And they never met. So, like, let's call it the CEO of like Vail hadn't met the CEO of like Winnebago, or these crazy conversations that were happening. We had panels set up on trade, participation, economy, workforce, and every CEO panel somehow referenced health. And it was just interesting because I've tried to push the health outdoor angle about 20 years ago. Really well-meaning folks in the White House then, but they wanted more data, more clinical trials, more peer-reviewed journal articles. And this was just the physical health side. I was like, we're just talking about biking and climbing and camping. But in this conversation a couple of years ago, people were just talking about being on water, like the blue mind. Like you don't have
Mhm.
to even be paddling. You could be sitting on a boat with a beer and your brain changes. Like it's about being outside and enjoying yourself and being with community, or even being alone outside actually makes you less lonely. So we've gone really deep into this data, but something hit me then that, fast forward 18 years from when I was in that White House meeting being asked for more information. I'm like, these are CEOs across the industry willingly making that jump to mental health, physical health, societal health. Let's dig in a bit more here. And we got the board support at our board meeting last year to make it a pillar of our next strategic plan. And it's been so incredible. It's like my team's whole, it gets us up in the morning because I think it's how we live our life, it's how we raise our families. And what I know, and you probably know, is it's not the norm in America.
Mhm.
And there's a $5 trillion healthcare problem industry. There's chronic disease, there's obesity, loneliness. addicted to our phones. And we're also the most indoor generation ever. And every generation gets more and more disconnected from nature. And that correlation is now being made. That's a direct correlation. That is directly linked. And so in my own life, where I'm getting like Instagram ads or talking to my friends about like gut health and melatonin and sleep and, all the trackables, everything has an outdoor anecdote. Like melatonin, go outside the first 5 minutes of the day. Oh, that works. Like gut health, garden, get your hands dirty. Truly, like microbacteria, like that's what it's for. Loneliness, go for a walk with your neighbor. So it's just really cool to link with something that's so I would call it like a-list priority for the nation right now. Like everyone's trying to figure out this health thing. It is the conversation. And we are literally the answer to a lot of things. We call it an upstream healthcare solution because a lot of our stuff is on the preventative side, which is the cost
Hmm.
saving side. So we're also a cost saver. Now, do we need a lot more data, I think, to get there and go to Blue Choice and say you need to make better decisions with your healthcare benefits programs because of this? I think, I think we're close. I think with AI, we're going to get closer, but no one in the past year has looked at me and asked me for data or where I got that or how I know that when we come up with these
Yeah, the premise is no
conversations.
longer being questioned anymore,
No,
right?
it's
Which
just
is in and of
inherently
itself a
adopted.
windfall.
That
But I
is the
guess
windfall. Yeah.
I want to key in on the last thing you were saying there, because I mean, and going back to Eric's initial question, part of this is about, okay, so we recognize and like we are more broadly, which in and of itself is a victory, recognizing
Yep.
that there is this nexus. And then OR is taking the step of like, all right, we know there's this nexus. What do we do about it in a way that can be implemented through policy or that can have some sort of connection with policy so we can
Yep.
make it real? In your proposal, you say, and I'm not sure, I'll just say in your proposal, under the headline "Health Systems and Institutions Building Stronger Partnerships Between the Healthcare Sector and Outdoor Economy to Integrate Outdoor Activity into Prevention and Care Strategies."
Yep.
I think you were starting to speak to this, but does that mean you envision somebody, like, say, getting a prescription to go on a rafting trip? Or is there a
Yes.
future, do you think, where health insurance pays for part of like a new sweet mountain bike?
Like
And like,
100%. And this is
love that
not
answer.
voodoo. This is like we are in conversations. Like I talked to a healthcare benefits program yesterday, one of the largest private employer healthcare benefits programs, and that's exactly what we're talking about. We have bill language, like we understand the mechanisms by which you can use your HSA, FSA counts for your
Hmm.
mountain bike, for your helmet, or for your rafting trip, your healthcare providers. And I used to say that, and I used to be like, okay, I'm like a little bit like, it's a reach, but it's kind of cool. Like, no, that is not the case. It's a healthcare imperative. It should be incentivized. It should be paid for. It should be prescribed. And there are doctors doing that, and the results are amazing. I mean, there's hospitals integrating the outdoors in their healing process, and people heal faster, and they get out of the hospital faster, and the beds turn over faster. The nurses and doctors can work longer hours and have better results of their surgeries because they're in hospitals that have windows everywhere that look over a mountainscape. There's hospitals that have partnerships with the Forest Service, like a permit, truly like a permit,
Hmm.
so they can get people out on the trail after orthopedic surgery. So this is happening. We are trying to bring those things to light, make those partnerships stronger, and then scale them and then institutionalize them in policy. If you didn't catch, so we had a meeting last week with Secretary Kennedy and Secretary Burgum. For the first time,
Yep.
two cabinet secretaries, one of public lands, one of health, talking about the outdoors and health and how we need to move this forward. And the next day, he launched Get Outdoors, Get Active. So it's a platform that connects people to public lands on a hike, like trying to, again, culturally move this. And of course, we're digging down much deeper with them and saying, okay, what's the policy now? TRICARE is under HHS. It's the biggest healthcare system in the country. It's the Medicaid Medicare system. So starting there, we're talking insurance providers. We're talking to ZocDoc. It's very exciting, and it's very close. Like it's not 2 years from now. It's like next year. Some of this stuff.
Right. I mean, so like when DOI and HSS are sitting around the table on it, which they were, this is the 15th, right? Or maybe that was when they released the,
I was in Cabo. Whitney ran it for ORR. I was on vacation,
yeah.
but
But I mean, so
I was there on Spirit.
so germane secretaries are involved and engaged. You've been putting together data around this to help support something that, unfortunately, we spend a lot of time in our industry having to like prove the things that are self-evident, but having to find proof points for the things that are self-evident and telling that story. Is the final step, like that legislative step of connecting this somehow legislatively to healthcare companies and coverage?
For sure, legislation's hard and it has a cost because, well, it's very complicated, but it would score very high, and so there would have to be an offset, and that's why it hasn't moved.
Hmm.
But it could be policy. The agency could create new policy that could be adopted. And it could be through these intermediary healthcare providers where they are the ones that are saying, buy your Peloton, put it through us, we'll approve it, and then we'll send it to your insurance provider. Well, we're saying, let us do that with our giant bike. We know if you're letting people do the Peloton, think about the health benefits of being on the actual bike versus in your
Yeah.
basement alone on a, I mean, so some of it takes real policy change, and we're excited about that because I think we actually have leadership in the administration that acknowledges that and wants to do it. Some of it does take tax code legislative change and preventative. I mean, right now, HSA, FSAs are primarily geared towards like once you already have a problem, it's your contacts because your eyesight's bad,
Yep.
it's your prescription because something happened. We just need that to be on the preventative care side. And so there's a whole host of other groups in that bandwagon with us, like gyms and, so we're not alone in that, sports leagues. And I just think that the partnership angle is such a low hanging fruit because some of these things can happen, like the example I gave of the giant bike instead of the Peloton. It's a flip in who's thinking about this and a flip in how doctors are getting information on it. And so we're working the doctor angle too, which is really exciting. American College of Lifestyle Medicine is the leader of like continuing education for the healthcare system, nurses, doctors, surgeons, and they are incorporating the outdoors. REI funded an institution with a grant to train the trainers, so they're all getting trained. So we're actually talking to them, I think later today, about using their network and having a training for all of their thousands of medical providers in the network about time outside and how that needs to be incorporated in care and preventative measures. So you can start to see that like this Parks prescription program, that's small and maybe there's hundreds of doctors doing it. Now we're talking about thousands of people. And then they're, who they educate. And we're thinking even bigger about going to the employer themselves. So the Amazons, the
Hmm.
Walmarts. And that's, where real change can happen. All of that, the things I just talked about in the past 2 minutes, do not require policy change. They don't require any money. I mean, money for, people to, us to have the conversations and make sure, but like no new
No new
government money,
appropriations.
no new
Yeah.
appropriations. And like, it doesn't, what we loved about this health piece when we were starting it is like so much of our work every day, and especially it felt like this about a year ago, depends on like when we wake up, what we see the new tariffs are and what we see is happening in Senate with our public like just felt like
Yeah.
what can we grab hold of and move no matter what. We can open, we can close our eyes at night and open them in the morning and this stuff is still moving forward and we have control over it. And so the health piece became that like calling for us to move good work for the industry, irregardless of politics. And it's been
Which
that. It's been really
which
exciting.
credit to you, by the way, because being able to relate certainly to like just the barrage of things that are coming through these days around recreation, public lands, whatever else. Oftentimes, I'm sure you can relate. It feels like what can we do but play, if not defense, then like informed like consultant to the folks that are developing policies, let alone be like, oh, well, against the barrage of everything coming at me, I'm also going to start this new proactive initiative and play some offense, which is,
You have to have
a lot easier
control.
said than done,
Yeah.
but credit to you.
Well, I
And I
felt
think it's
like
a
my
great
team
idea.
was in a dark place. I was like, we got to do something that we know is going to help the industry.
Yeah.
And I think we're all motivated by it because I think it's the solution to so many things. Like it connects with schools, it connects with like it's the right thing to do, and there's a bottom line for our businesses on it. Like we're still a
Hmm.
business. We're not like that, philanthropic. Like we care about business growth and the
Yeah.
economy, and there is nothing that will grow our businesses more than people connecting time outside to living a healthy long life. That's where people are spending their money. That's what they're spending their time. That's what longevity, like if you're top 1%, you're trying to live forever, you're going to get outside. If you're, struggling to make ends meet and your healthcare prices are going up and you want to lower them, you're going to realize it's important to get outside. So we need to make sure that we're creating the infrastructure so everyone can participate, not just, the top 1%. And we need to, create the system so that it's easy to do. Cause I think, it's healthy, it's good. And now how do you integrate it into your two jobs and your real life? And that's when we work with hospitals, and that's when we work with school systems, and that's when we work
Yep.
with workplaces. So we have this commitment for outdoor companies to walk the walk and take our own medicine and incorporate it. So like my team has walking meetings. So we're not on Zoom all day. Like if it's an internal meeting, you better be outside on a walk and tell me what you're doing and tell me where it is. And I hope you're thinking better. I hope you're getting fresh air. And if you have an external meeting and you have to be on Zoom, that's fine. But you got your outdoor time that day. And it's little things like that that we're challenging our companies to do. Because if we're not going to start with that, it's kind of crazy to ask like, Amazon to do that. So I think we've got a lot of internal work with our industry just to get to a place where we're reminding ourselves what it means to live, an outdoor lifestyle.
Yep.
I love that starting small piece. Personally, I think my mountain bike has probably led to more medical bills than it would remove, but
It has
I do have a
objectively for sure.
tendency.
No,
Yeah.
I
I have a
know.
tendency to like hit things going fast. So, I'm probably
Two
hopefully an
broken necks,
exception.
one broken back. Is that what we're at right now for you, Eric?
Yeah, plus a bunch of other stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. He's doing great.
Yeah.
I didn't
So I
take
guess
that. I hadn't thought about that angle actually.
well, I
That's
think
how we pay back the insurance providers that are losing money on our healthy outdoors
Eric's the
people.
anomaly.
Right.
Yeah. Time outside actually leads to drastically reduced health outcomes for Eric,
God,
but for
that's
most
hilarious.
Americans, it is the opposite. Anyway, you were asking, Eric?
Well, I guess it's sort of two things. One, in jest, like, do you envision that 5 years from now, when we're watching TV, instead of seeing drug commercials, we'll be seeing like, the outdoor industry's version of drug commercials where it's like a rafting thing talking about all the health benefits. Um,
Wow, I mean, TV is going to be obsolete in 5 years, probably.
yeah,
But
yeah, for sure.
yes, no, I mean that, and then I mean that's what I've talked to RV companies. I'm talking to boat companies. I'm like, you are part of this. You are the vessel. You are the vehicle to get the. Don't think that just because you're not going 20 miles an hour and huffing and puffing, like you're not part of the health like answer. So I think people should be using that now. I think there's enough data that you could make one strong data point, and that should be the commercial for sure. But hopefully we don't even need the commercials because hopefully people are so aware of the health benefits that they, incorporate that into every vacation and all the time off. And, we've talked a lot about the AI angle at ORR of like the opportunity that could open for free time. So, bring in health and then bring in this like leisure time potentially. And what are people going to do in leisure time? Well, they're not going to sit on their computer and do more AI. I mean, I think people are going to want to feel human in a world where we're becoming less and less, human. And I don't know about you, but where I feel the most human is certainly outside. I don't know that there's another place you could feel more human or more in touch with, like
Yeah.
something bigger. So, I think we have some really big tailwinds. What is going to be important is that we seize the opportunity and that we take advantage of them, that we work with every possible partner. And I think that's kind of goes full circle to the beginning of like, how do you work in this era, in this environment? It's like, people who might not be our partner on forest planning or these things that are important, they might be our partner on unlocking the tools to connecting with the healthcare system or with something. So it's just constantly keeping those doors open, always saying what we mean and feel and what's good for our industry and being honest and upfront about our policies and the values we have. But we haven't shut any doors yet, and I think that's kept many doors open that we never thought would be.
Yeah. So I think just to play devil's advocate on this a little bit, because so many of our conversations in the last year here in Idaho, especially, but I think everywhere, is around rising healthcare costs and having more things that your health insurance potentially is going to help cover. You're going to get a prescription for a rafting, like whatever that is, right? Like, so, um, do you see, or is there, like, you kind of, I think, have alluded to this, but that there's really pretty concrete evidence that this preventative care, that having insurance companies invest in doing things on the front end, like spend a little now to save a lot later. They actually have sort of the documented evidence and are buying in on that. And so by doing this, we're not going to see our insurance rates go up. In an ideal world, we're going to see them stay even or even go down because we're actually reducing the expensive parts.
We're actually starting with that employer benefit side and the HSA FSA side for that reason. So insurance companies, the healthcare system is rigged. It wants you to be unhealthy and it pays out when you're unhealthy, right? So the healthcare system is a really, really hard system to do the right thing under. But when you have ownership over what you can spend your pre-tax dollars on, you're making a choice with the data you have, and actually, it's probably better for me to have this FSA money go to ski lesson this year than hoarding it for whatever. Or maybe you do both. You probably do both. You get it for your contacts and you get it for your kids climbing camp. um, the healthcare, the workforce piece, the employer benefits piece is the really fascinating part because it takes into account they actually want healthier people. They want people to work longer, and they're willing to incentivize things like outdoor time off trips. You see this whole thing of like um any vacation days, all of those things. That's a cost to companies, to employers, but they know that it's going to mean more employee health and employee mental health over the long term. So we're actually working with the employer benefits system to help make those decisions. And then I think that funnels up eventually to the insurance providers because there is that direct link. And also if people are healthier, insurance companies don't have they're not bringing in as much money. So the insurance piece is probably the final nut to crack. But if we have the agencies leading in the right direction, Congress leading in the right direction, your tax-free counseling in the right direction, and employer benefits programs, then we've got pretty much everyone going and saying this is the right path forward.
Right. The
And
path
maybe
forward
not
right now is
even
the on ramp to that final. I mean, I was going to say final solution, bad words. But it's the on ramp to something that does actually address the elephant in the room of insurance and healthcare in the United States, which we can't solve that. But working with other interested parties in ways that are self-interested, both for the individual as well as with the company, we can create incentive structures and demonstrate over time that this does have good outcomes, both for business and for health, and hopefully thereby in the long term, tie more concretely into the healthcare system itself. But pull the levers we have access to.
hospital, we're working with just providers like doctors. They are doing interesting things with how they code this kind of stuff. I mean, there's that kind of stuff too, is like making sure providers are paid for this because when you're a doctor and you get 15 minutes for a patient, that extra 5 minutes to talk about time outside and you should be camping, you should be hiking, here's some parks. We have to make sure they can bill that, right? To the insurance provider. The insurance provider is going to accept that. So there's intricate things. I'm not saying this is easy, but I'm saying the infrastructure is right out our front door. The companies exist, and so we're not trying to build a whole new model. We don't need a new lab or a clinical trial. There's no new medicine we need. We really just need to connect it with existing systems. And the more we can show, I think, success where it's working and that ROI of lower healthcare costs to people, they're going to ask for it, and the insurance companies are going to have to abide at some.
Yeah. And I mean, in some, very rarely are easy things worth doing, right? It's usually the hard things. And we put a man on the moon, we split the atom. Comparatively, this should be easier. It requires a
I
larger
just want to go
audience.
back to the 80s and the 70s and a time where
Just everyone
we
wants to go
weren't
back to
talking
the
about this.
80s,
I
okay?
know. I know.
There are some places which once you leave them, you can never return to. Such at least the case as with childhood hometowns and the 80s. Pretty sure that's the quote.
The 90s summer
Um,
thing is trending again, and I love that. It's like your kids are outside, they're kind of free
what are we doing? We're
range,
doing
they're
snap
having
bracelets again?
snap bracelets, popsicles, Dunkaroos, as long as there's no dying
I've been
on
bringing
whatever.
popsicles back for a long time now, so you're preaching the choir on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to move on to the next area we have. Shifting gears. We started off the conversation at least alluding to big tents and broader coalitions, and understandably because ORR has this enormous nationwide coalition representing, I'm going to name a few. Some have been named already, but skiing, paddling, cycling, hunting, fishing, marine RV, motorized rec, guided trips, folks like us, campgrounds. So enormous tent most of the time. And I think we've seen this play out in terms of policy outcomes and just general influence and recognition in and outside of Congress. But most of the time, that's a tremendous asset. But are there issues where that big tent aligns? I mean, I think there are issues where that big tent aligns and issues where folks are coming at things from genuinely opposite or convergent ends or toward convergent goals. I'm interested personally, like, how do you approach keeping such a big tent together toward these cross-cutting national goals?
I thought it would be so much harder because running OIA, government affairs, 1,400 companies. I was like, this is like so. Then they were all very similar, all outdoor gear and brands. This has been so much easier than anyone could ever imagine. But I think it's because, and we're at a different, we're one level, above trade associations. So like the hard stuff, we might say like Aaron's working on that, like for guides and outfitters, like he's doing the divisive work, for where maybe you don't get along with the horse people and you hash it out through like your trade associations. We only work on things where there's agreement, right? Around our members, or at least not disagreement. So we decidedly don't do place-based work. A lot of place-based work, there's probably a ton of agreement, but we just don't do it because that's where the trailhead conflicts come up. So you will never see us work
Mhm.
on a wilderness bill or the CRAs that have been going on, like the Boundary Waters. Um, However, what's really exciting is we can see a place like the Boundary Waters that's so important to recreation, like just across the board, important to recreation economies, all the things that we value and that we're trying to promote. And we can say, okay, we're not going to work place based because that does bring up conflicts. We're going to work on the CRA at the national level and say, this is not the
Yeah.
way that we should change laws that govern how we use our lands in these areas, and we can have that conversation. So I think that that's where, there is agreement, like even with travel management, some of the things that are coming up. Do our organizations agree on the ground travel management plans? 100% no, probably. Like most of the time, there's probably not agreement. But do they agree there should be clear guidelines? They should be readdressed every couple of years. There should be time for public comment. There should be technology included. We should look at the data. Yes. And I think the business um focus too is so unique because we are looking at, growing the pie so that more people are getting outside and so that more businesses have slices of the pie. The pie's bigger, the slices are bigger. We're not looking at a pie that stays the same size and we keep dividing it. So as ORR grows the pie, hopefully what you feel and Horse feels and RVIA feels and NMA feels is like, oh, we have more opportunity. That plan works better. The planning process works better. And therefore, we got more of what we wanted out of that plan. Or Explore is helping guiding and outfitting work better. And therefore, we're getting our permits quicker. And so, you know what? If we didn't get that one in that really important area, at least we know why. Or they said no, at least we got a response and we can move on
Yeah.
with our business. And so, I'm not downplaying how hard coalition work is and can be, but I think what's been, and I was not responsible for this, but like the founders of ORR, the trade associations themselves, set such clear guardrails and guidelines that I can say no to anything that would divide our membership. Or anything that's not good for growing the recreation economy. And that gives me, a lot of space to say yes to awesome things. We work on a lot of stuff. And sometimes there's things that the marine industry does not care about forest planning probably. I mean, it's just not as important to them. And you guys might not care as much about the right whale issue on the Atlantic coast, right? But if enough groups care and no one's against it, we'll often work in that area. I think the thing that's probably most transferable to other associations like yours and our other members is ensuring that we get around the table in person, and all of these people, these
Absolutely.
leaders know each other. And so when people are like looking at me like, how do the ski and snowmobile people get along? I'm like, they sit next to each other at board meetings. Like they have they both care about winter. They both want a lot of snow. Like they get along really well. And so I think understanding that from a business perspective, we all pretty much want the same thing, and that our consumers are very experiential. So this guy might be a skier today, but he's going to be a whitewater rafter in the summer. He's going to get a snowmobile lifted if he's like Eric and he gets hurt. It's going to be a snowmobile that saves him. It's like, down the mountain. So I think, thinking less siloed and more about the greater good actually helps your siloed issues. And
Well, and
our
it's great to
board has
have the
seen
different
that.
levels, right? I mean, so like
Yes.
ORR, and I think one thing, and I'm glad you went where you did with the question. Like one thing I have thought about, like ORR does have this like this niche, and it's like cross cutting where people disagree. We don't engage. We engage on like process. We engage on stability, business stability. I think that's also more where America Outdoors tends to sit. There are areas where that necessarily diverges just because we are a single trade association. We're representing a single, sector with many sectors below it. So like a little bit less latitude to stay just top level. And then as you get down, not down, but you get over to Eric's like state based, it's like your ability to not engage on issue by having been in that seat, like your ability to not engage on forest plans or to not engage on sort of issue area specific trailhead level issues is functionally non-existent in many cases. But what unites all those things, what you spoke to at the outset, Jess, which is like business stability, focus on process and procedural legitimacy and procedural appropriateness, and then just having the different frames of analysis with people that are working together, right?
Who you're most different from is your greatest point of strength when you're showing up for policy. So when we can go
Absolutely.
to the Forest Service and say, actually, all of these groups are in agreement on this, and they're like, wait, those groups hate each other, those groups don't work together, those groups, whatever. We're
Nevertheless.
like, no, they all agree that you should be doing this. It's a really powerful, and at least at the beginning, because it was so unique when we started. I think people are used to these groups working together now because we've been doing this for a while. But when I went into those first couple of meetings and I was like, I have the snowmobilers and the skiers, I have the horse and the e-bikers, I have and you go down the ride, they're like, oh, so this is a win layup. I'm like, no, we are handing you a win and no one's going to come out. No one, with reasonable business acumen is going to come out and say this is a bad idea. And I think a lot of times in a really busy, oversaturated policy environment, you just need to hand over the layup. And I know you guys have done that. Eric, I know you're doing a ton in Idaho on that, and we're trying to do that at the national level. And the layups we're going to get some layups.
I think that what you're saying is spot on, to the point where we're more on the ground and we're like in the middle of some stuff that is controversial within our membership for sure. And the thing I keep thinking about as I'm trying to kind of hold coalitions together is how do I frame whatever this specific thing is? How do I frame that up to the bigger principle that we agree on? How do I bring it up to, okay, we're talking about this one thing, but we're really talking about like bigger picture access, and we all believe in that. Like I was at a meeting with here in Idaho with some House members trying to put together a coalition to talk about public lands in Idaho, and it was like us, outfitters and guides. It was Trout Unlimited, and then it was like the logging lobby, the mining lobby, the grazing lobby, and talking about public lands. It's like, what are the big pictures that we can all agree on? And it was, we don't want land sold. We think travel management's important. It's like, so framing, getting up to the places where you agree allows you to get down into the depths where you maybe don't, I think.
Totally, 100%. And we embody that because that's what we're meant to do. But I do think for coalition work, like at what I did at OIA, what you're doing, what Aaron's doing, it is the largest common denominator. Bringing that back again and again, and also people understanding like a win on one issue is not like we have to win on a lot of this so that we're just winning more. A lot of these things matter.
Yeah.
And this one might not be your particular win, but I like talk about it like boiling pots, simmering pots, I guess. You put a lot of simmering pots in the oven, and maybe they're not all your favorite food in them, but like when one's ready to boil, if you can jump on it, like you're helping another group, and then they're going to help you when your pot's ready. So some of it's, that old like fashioned handshake and like knowing these other groups. And we've come to the mat for a lot of other, groups, I think, and they're going to come to the mat, for Explore. That was our unique thing. That was just the recreation economy. But every group that we have worked on with LWCF, with public land sales, sportsman issues, got behind it, signed the letter, called their congressman. I don't even think they knew what was in it, but there was such goodwill. So I think what you're doing in Idaho is a great example of that. Like we need those groups and they need us, and we might not agree on how we're using the land, but let's just agree to keep it public and have a process to determine that.
Yep. Well, we're running up on time, so I have two really brief rapid fire questions for you, and then we'll close out. One, what's the one thing you'd want every outfitter guide who listens to this to do or to walk away with by the end?
Aaron and Eric say you should do. No,
I love that.
I
No, that's the correct answer.
Okay, good. But I also want, I was so impacted by a couple early rafting trips, like one on the Snake, one in Yellowstone, and I just had I guess a more recent experience on the Green that was pretty life changing. So amazing work, and it's just critical what you do.
And where can people follow all the work you and the ORR team are doing? Where should they go if they want to get plugged in or take action on anything you're working on, whether it's around health outcomes in the outdoors or uh, other organizational initiatives?
Recreationroundtable.org has a lot of information. Truly, we mainly work with trade associations. So Aaron, I think you're getting the information out to your members that's relevant to them. But I would say for ORR things, sign the commitment on being a, outdoor brand that cares about health. That's really helpful as we're going to other industries and asking them to do the same. And then work on Legacy Restoration Fund. I don't know when this podcast is going to air, but if it's before next week, you have an opportunity to
It will
impact the
be.
House, the Senate vote.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Weigh in with your members of Congress about how important it is. And I think just know how important it is, like at any level, to send in any note on policy. They count I talked to a House Natural Resources staffer today, and they're counting every organization that weighs in an LRF and like count literally like, hey, we're at 140. Now they're 141. So you could be 142. And that's really, really impactful. And thanks for the time.
Yeah. Well, this was exactly the conversation I was hoping for. Thank you for making time. I know that every day is busy for you, so I know this one is no exception from that. If you run guided trips for a living, the policy being made this year will have real consequences for your operations year after year after year. That's not meant to be scary, but just to remind you that it is true. And I think, Jess, you make the case really well for why we all need to be on the table and for why apathy is not a solution to current civics. We all need to be engaged. Participate is the only
On the
way that
menu.
it's going to work.
Yep.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Jess. It was wonderful.
Thank you. And awesome.
Well, thanks to Jess Turner for joining us and walking through all of that, the policy rooms, the coalition dynamics, and what it actually means for the people running trips on public lands.
Yeah. I think Jess made some really good points, stuff that we've talked about and probably we'll talk about more, but that alarmist headlines these days can oftentimes outrun actual rulemaking or actual developments. So it's important that you tune into places like this where we tell you what's real and what's not, or at least we opine about it. And I think, something that I'll keep hammering, which is that your voice in DC does matter, that there's only one way to actually participate in the democratic process and see it through. So whether it's a route, permit, season, river mile, generalized outrage doesn't move the needle. You have to put your money where your mouth is. So really encourage you to participate.
Yeah. And just, as we kind of close down, one more quick update, related to people getting stuff done. Iowa just became the 25th state to establish an Office of Outdoor Recreation. So this network of states that are focusing on coordinating access to the outdoors, outdoor recreation, and seeing that as a, important part of their overall economy is growing. And then also, mark your calendars. The America Outdoors Conference and Expo in Oklahoma City is December 8th through 11th. And you can probably start registering for that soon. The Idaho Outfitters and Guides Association Conference is December 1st through 3rd at Tamarack Resort. And registration for that will open the 1st of July. So you can start planning your awesome, business development opportunities or places you can go learn, meet people, all those kinds of fun things. I always found those when I was an outfitter to be two of the most important weeks of the year for both making connections with others and learning new things and getting kind of excited for the next season and the things I was going to do to grow my business. So get those on the calendar and start registering.
Absolutely. There was a couple other things. Stay tuned for future podcasts. We'll probably touch in on some of the details as they get worked out or don't on both the Great America Outdoors Act, or America the Beautiful Act, and the Great America Outdoors Act 250 to see what actually impacts you there. But if you are somebody who takes international visitors, there are some elements within the Senate version at this point that certainly would impact your operation. So stay tuned for future pods on that.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
yeah. Find us at americaoutdoors.org or IOGA.org. And we'll be back here in the next couple of weeks with another interview and some more updates on all things outfitters and guides at the national level. See ya.
thanks, folks.